I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her overfluffed bleach blonde curls bobbing across my front lawn. Wanda Summers, head of the Willow Glen HOA, was stomping toward my front porch like she owned it. She had her HOA clipboard, her ridiculous rhinestone sunglasses, and that look on her face like she just sniffed spoiled milk. I was sipping coffee on the porch, watching the sun crawl over the rooftops. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday. I'd just leased out my second unit to a traveling ICU nurse named Jenna, solid tenant. Background check perfect. Rent paid 3 months ahead. But Wanda? She had a problem. She didn't know I was the landlord. She thought I was just some lazy tenant in a hoodie with a beard who, in her words, probably doesn't even recycle. "Excuse me," she snapped, tapping her pen against the railing like it was a gavel. "We need to talk about your lease situation." I raised a brow. "My lease?" She pulled out a manila folder like she was about to serve me a subpoena. "We've received multiple complaints about unauthorized subletting. HOA bylaws prohibit short-term rentals, and we've been informed that you're violating the rules. That's grounds for fines and possible eviction." I stood up, casually. "You've been informed by who?" She pointed across the street. "Several board members have noticed strange cars at all hours, different people coming and going, and one of our residents saw your tenant walking a pit bull without a leash. That's a violation." And she said Jenna told her she was only here for a few weeks. I blinked. Jenna's a traveling nurse. She's on a 4-month assignment. That's not short-term. Wanda clicked her tongue. "According to the board, it is. You'll be receiving a formal notice. And if you don't remove the tenant, we'll begin legal proceedings." She turned and marched back down my driveway like she just won something. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because what Wanda didn't know, and what would absolutely ruin her week, was that I wasn't the tenant. I was the landlord. My name's Neely. I own the duplex. Both units. Bought it cash after my contract with the city ended. Used to be a zoning inspector, so I know every clause in this neighborhood's bylaws. I live in one unit and rent the other. All legal. All documented. But Wanda didn't care about facts. She cared about control. And when she realized her little power play wasn't sticking, she escalated. By Monday morning, Jenna called me in a panic. "Porter," she said, "I think someone's spreading rumors about me." A neighbor asked if I was running an escort service. My stomach dropped. That night, I found Wanda parked in her driveway, watering her flowers like she hadn't just accused a licensed nurse of prostitution. I walked up, staying calm. "Hey, Wanda, got a second?" She didn't even flinch. "If it's about the tenant, it's an HOA matter now." "Oh, I'm sure it is. Just wondering why someone told Mrs. Lanning that Jen is involved in nightly operations. Sound familiar?" Wanda pursed her lips. "I don't control what people say. Maybe if you didn't bring in questionable tenants, we wouldn't have this problem." I looked her dead in the eye. "Jen is a nurse. The only thing she's trafficking is patients to the ICU." Wanda rolled her eyes. "You clearly don't understand the reputation of this neighborhood. We have standards." I smiled, tight. "And I have a lawyer." That got her attention. She tried to play it off, but I already knew what she was doing. I'd spoken to 2 neighbors who admitted Wanda had knocked on their doors, warning them that my unit was basically a motel and that the girl over there is probably not safe to be around your kids. She even told one couple that I might be running an illegal rental operation without permits. It wasn't just gossip. It was defamation. So I printed everything. Screenshots, statements, timeline. I even got Jenna's supervisor to write a formal letter confirming her employment and contract dates. Then I pulled out the nuclear option. I filed a civil defamation suit. Not just against Wanda, but the Willow Glen HOA itself. That's when things really got interesting. By Friday, I received a letter from the HOA attorney. It was an invitation to attend a special meeting regarding my alleged conduct and violations. I showed up in a button-down shirt and clean jeans. Wanda was already there, sitting at the head of the table like a queen in her court. 3 other board members flanked her, all nodding like wind-up bobbleheads. She started in immediately. "Mr. Neely, we've reviewed the situation and determined that your lease agreements are in violation of Section 7, Paragraph C of the HOA bylaws, which states that leases must be a minimum of 6 months." I nodded slowly. "You're referring to the version from 2 years ago. That clause was amended last June to allow for leases over 90 days with board notice." I sent that notice. I even received an acknowledgement from your secretary. The room went quiet. Wanda blinked. I pulled out a printed email. Right here. Dated June 3rd. From your HOA email. Says, thank you for your notice regarding the new tenant. We'll keep it on file. Wanda snatched the paper, practically vibrating. That doesn't mean it was approved. I shook my head. Doesn't need to be approved. Just requires notice. And I gave it. Which means everything's by the book. One of the board members, a guy named Terry who always looked like he'd rather be golfing, cleared his throat. Wanda, is this accurate? She didn't answer. I leaned forward. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because your president has spent the past week spreading lies about my tenant and about me. She's told neighbors that Jenna is engaged in criminal activity, that I'm running an illegal operation. And I've got 3 written statements, plus eyewitness testimony, confirming it came from her. Wanda's face turned a shade of red I didn't know existed. The board scrambled. Terry and the others started flipping through papers, whispering to each other. Wanda sat frozen, lips twitching. I've already filed the defamation suit, I said. And trust me, I'm not bluffing. I've owned property in this city for 15 years. I know slander when I see it. And I know how to prove damages. Wanda tried to cut in, but Terry held up a hand. We'll need to review the complaint. You do that, I said, standing. But you should also know the city's legal office already has a copy. And if any additional rumors come out, I'll add emotional distress and harassment. As I walked out, I heard Wanda muttering under her breath. By the next morning, things had changed. People waved at me again. A few neighbors even apologized. Jenna got a basket of muffins from the woman who'd called her at nighttime worker. But Wanda? She was just getting started. The following Tuesday, I noticed Wanda's car parked on the far end of the cul-de-sac, not in her driveway. Normally she'd showcase that pearlescent SUV like it was a trophy, always parked at the edge of her perfectly edged lawn. But now she was hiding in plain sight, watching the street from behind tinted windows. It was subtle in the way a sore thumb tries to blend in with a bouquet. I was on my way back from the city archives. I'd pulled the HOA's incorporation documents and past annual meeting minutes, everything filed since Willow Glen was established 15 years ago. Something wasn't adding up. The bylaws had been amended multiple times, but there was no record of those amendments being properly filed with the county. That made them unenforceable. I needed confirmation, and I got it from a clerk who remembered Wanda from a particularly heated filing dispute. She wanted us to backdate a document. The clerk had told me. We don't do that. She left furious. That wasn't just sloppy. That was illegal. Back home, I found a letter taped to Jenna's door. It wasn't in an envelope. Just a single sheet of paper, printed in bold Times New Roman, attempting to declare her lease null and void due to HOA non-compliance with tenant registry protocols. I took a photo, bagged it in a freezer bag, and handed it to my lawyer the next morning. While I was at it, I installed a second camera on the side of the duplex angle to catch anyone approaching Jenna's unit. I'd already caught Wanda once, pacing near the mailbox with a phone to her ear while pointing at Jenna's windows. No mail in her hand. No reason to be there. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Jordan, one of the other homeowners on the block. He ran a mobile auto detailing business and usually kept to himself. I hadn't spoken to him much beyond hellos, but he sounded rattled. Man, I don't know what Wanda's trying to pull, he said. She just came by asking if I'd signed something about your property. Wanted me to say I felt unsafe with renters around. I frowned. Did she say why? She said it was for an emergency board vote. But there's no meeting notice. Nothing official. Just her clipboard and a weird smile. She give you anything to sign? Yeah, but I told her no. Took a photo of it though. He sent it to me. It was a typed statement with a blank line for a signature, accusing me of hosting an illegal boarding house and alleging frequent suspicious activity. No letterhead, no official seal, just Wanda's name and a date. The next day, I confronted her during her usual morning walk. She was wearing a neon pink visor and pretending to be on a call, but I walked straight up to her. You're manufacturing complaints now? She didn't even blink. I don't know what you're referring to. You asked Jordan to sign a false statement. That's witness tampering. Her voice dropped. I'm trying to protect this community. If you won't follow the rules, we have to act. There are rules for HOA conduct too. And you're breaking every one. She narrowed her eyes. You're welcome to file another complaint, Mr. Neely. But I don't think the board's interested in your accusations. I didn't respond. I just walked back to my house and sent the photo to my lawyer. On Thursday, I received a certified envelope from the HOA. Inside was a notice of non-compliance and a fine of $1,000 for failure to register a lease with the HOA registry. The problem? There was no such registry. I checked the bylaws again. Nothing. I called the HOA's listed number. Straight to voicemail. Left a message. Never got a call back. So I did something Wanda never expected. I called a meeting. Under the HOA's own rules, any homeowner could request a special meeting if they obtained signatures from at least 5 residents. I got 7 by lunchtime. Most people were tired of Wanda's antics but never knew how to push back. Once I showed them the letter Jenna received and the fake complaint Wanda tried to circulate, people started asking questions. Real ones. One couple admitted their irrigation system had been flagged for non-compliance last year after they refused to support Wanda's re-election as board president. Another neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, said Wanda once threatened to report her shed extension to code enforcement unless she agreed to stop running a daycare out of her home. It wasn't just me. Wanda had a pattern. By Saturday evening, we met in Jordan's garage. Folding chairs, donuts, and a big whiteboard he borrowed from his church. I laid everything out: photos, letters, copies of the bylaws, and records from the city showing Wanda had never filed the amended rules she was trying to enforce. Then came the video. I played the clip from my new security camera, the one that caught Wanda slipping that letter onto Jenna's door in the middle of the night. She wasn't wearing her usual bright outfits. This time she was in all black, put up, glancing around like she was casing the place. She wore gloves. Gasps filled the garage. "That's trespassing," someone muttered. "No," I said. "That's harassment. And that's not the only footage I have." I played another clip. This one showed Wanda talking to a man in a gray hoodie behind the community dumpster. Later, he walked up to my property and started taking photos through the window. Jenna was inside at the time. When she saw the man through the curtain, he ran. I'd already filed a police report. The following Monday, detectives visited my home to collect the footage and statements. Jenna gave hers. So did Jordan. When the officers tried to contact Wanda, she refused to speak without legal counsel. By Wednesday, a uniformed officer pinned a notice to the HOA bulletin board outside the clubhouse. An official investigation was underway. Residents were not to destroy or alter any documents related to HOA enforcement actions. Wanda was silent after that, but her silence wasn't peace. 2 days later, she emailed the entire HOA mailing list using the official address. Claimed she was temporarily stepping down due to health reasons, but not before appointing a temporary acting president, her cousin, Marla, who just happened to live 2 blocks away. I did some digging. Marla had never attended a single HOA meeting. Records showed she bought her house 6 months ago, but the deed listed Wanda as the secondary trustee. That meant Wanda still had financial ties to the property. It was a shell move. She was trying to control the board from the shadows, but she'd overplayed her hand. I submitted a formal petition for a recall vote. With 8 homeowners already supporting it, we passed the threshold to force a full board election. The city clerk's office received the petition and confirmed the vote would be binding, since the HOA's incorporation status had lapsed for failing to update its annual filings. Wanda didn't just lose power, she lost legal standing. By the time the defamation hearing rolled around, her lawyer was pushing for a private settlement. But I wasn't interested in a quiet payoff. I wanted her lies exposed on record. Jenna testified. So did Jordan. So did Mrs. Hargrove. The judge didn't even need an hour to rule in our favor. Damages were awarded. Wanda was ordered to pay a hefty fine and issue a formal retraction to all HOA members. She tried to appeal, but the evidence was airtight. Between the video, the fake complaint, and her own written threats, the court saw through every defense she offered. The funniest part? Her apology letter had to be read aloud at the next community meeting by Marla, who turned so pale halfway through that she had to sit down. Wanda's house went up for sale 3 weeks later. No one waved when the moving truck pulled away. For a little while, things quieted down. Wanda was gone. Her house sat empty with stale blinds drawn and a realtor's lockbox dangling from the doorknob. The gossip slowed. Jenna extended her lease another 4 months, and the community started to feel normal. But I knew better than to let my guard down. In the weeks following Wanda's exit, the HOA board operated in limbo. Marla, still technically the acting president, hadn't attended a single meeting since the apology letter incident. The rest of the board members were disorganized at best. Terry, the only one with any real sense, quietly resigned and moved out of state after his wife took a job in Oregon. The recall vote had passed, but without a functioning board to initiate replacements or schedule new leadership elections, the HOA was legally adrift. I filed the paperwork to have the HOA's status officially dissolved through the county records office. With the incorporation lapsed and the leadership structure non-functional, it wasn't hard to push through. Residents received notice by mail. Willow Glen HOA was now a non-operational entity. That should have been the end of it. Until 3 weeks later, when a man in a dark green polo shirt knocked on my door holding a clipboard and wearing a badge that read, Willow Glen Neighborhood Compliance Office. I opened the door halfway, eyeing the logo on his shirt. It looked new. Too new. You Porter Neely, he asked. Who wants to know? I'm with the Compliance Division for Willow Glen. We're doing property audits based on community safety concerns. I need to inspect both units. I tilted my head. There's no compliance division. Willow Glen doesn't even have a registered HOA anymore. He tapped the clipboard. We've been reinstated under a provisional status. Emergency executive order. I've got documentation authorizing inspections. Let me see that. He hesitated, then handed me a typed sheet attached to the clipboard. The header read, Emergency Administrative Oversight, Willow Glen Neighborhood Council. No seal. No signatures. Just a blurry watermark and a block of text referencing community stabilization efforts. I flipped the sheet over. Blank. This isn't legal, I said. You're not entering anything. And if you show up again without a court order, I'll have you charged with criminal trespass. He opened his mouth, then thought better of it and left without another word. I made a call to the county clerk's office. No new neighborhood council had been registered. I checked the city's online zoning and neighborhood database. No updates, no provisional filings, nothing. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't legit. By that afternoon, I had Jenna move her car into the garage and reactivated the side camera. I contacted a friend in the city attorney's office, someone I used to work with during my zoning days. She offered to dig into the situation discreetly. The next day, I got her call. Something weird's going on, she said. There's a new nonprofit registered under the name Willow Glen Community Action Group. Filed 2 weeks ago. The paperwork was rushed and used a P.O. box in a neighboring county. Who signed it? Marla Whitaker. And get this, Wanda Summers is listed as the registered agent. I stood in my driveway, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding. She's trying to rebrand the HOA under a nonprofit to dodge oversight. Looks that way. And they've submitted a request to the city for grant funding under a community safety initiative. You're kidding. Wish I was. They listed you as a problematic landlord in their application. Claimed your property has been the source of multiple disturbances. I couldn't even respond for a second. She continued. I flagged the application for review. It won't go through without further documentation. But you need to prepare. If they're pushing this hard, it's not just about control anymore. They're chasing money. That night, I sat down with Jordan and 2 other residents who'd helped with the recall. We reviewed the nonprofit's registration, the fake compliance officer's visit, and the city grant application. Wanda's trying to rebuild the entire HOA as a nonprofit shell, I said. She's using it to go around the law, claim authority over the neighborhood, and probably pocket grant funds. Jordan leaned back in his chair. So we call the cops? We need more than that, I said. We need proof of fraud. Filing false claims to the city with forged complaints? That's criminal. But I want her caught red-handed. We agreed to set up a sting. Not the flashy kind. Just a quiet trap. I had a friend from the zoning department pose as a potential donor to the new nonprofit. She scheduled a meeting with Marla and Wanda at the local coffee shop under the pretense of supporting community stabilization. I gave her a discreet audio recorder and a list of specific questions to ask, questions that would force them to admit their lack of authority and fraudulent intentions. The recording she brought back was damning. Wanda bragged about taking back control of the neighborhood and referred to the residents as sheep who don't know what's good for them. When asked about their legal standing, Marla laughed and said, "We don't need the city's permission. As long as they think we're cleaning up the area, they'll rubber stamp anything." Then came the kicker. Wanda said, "We've already got a file on Neely. He's the one we'll use to justify the grant. Worst case, we say his tenant threatened us. We just need one more complaint." The recording was more than enough. I sent it to the city attorney's office, who forwarded it to the district prosecutor. Within a week, subpoenas were issued for the nonprofit's records. A warrant was served on Marla's house. Boxes of documents were seized, including drafts of fake incident reports and a spreadsheet titled Targeted Properties. My duplex was at the top of the list. Then came the raid. Wanda was arrested at a strip mall office she'd been renting under the name WGS Management Consultants. It was a one-room setup with a folding table, a few chairs, and a banner that looked like it had been printed at a gas station. In the back, officers found a laptop containing forged emails from residents, all written in the same font and timestamped within minutes of each other. The charge sheet was long fraud, conspiracy to defraud a municipality, obstruction, and criminal impersonation. Marla was arrested that same afternoon. The neighborhood lit up. People stood on their porches as the patrol cars rolled through, watching in stunned silence. One woman clapped. Another took pictures. No one looked away. In the weeks that followed, the city appointed a temporary oversight committee to manage the neighborhood's transition away from HOA control. They invited me to join, but I declined. I'd done my part. It was time for someone else to steer the ship. Jenna eventually transferred to another hospital upstate, leaving a thank you note and a small wooden plaque that read, "Fight like you live here." I hung it in the hallway. As for the house Wanda left behind, it sat unsold for months. No one wanted the cursed Queen's castle. Eventually, it was purchased by a young couple who ripped out the manicured hedges and replaced them with native plants and wildflowers. Their kid plays in the driveway now, drawing chalk rockets and riding a scooter in wide circles. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet that follows when the noise finally stops. But I still keep the cameras up, just in case. The first hearing in Wanda's criminal trial was scheduled for early September. By then, summer had already begun to retreat, and the Willow Glen neighborhood was unrecognizable in the best way. Yards were scruffier but more alive. Neighbors spoke freely without peeking over their shoulders, and the community bulletin board had been replaced with a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "This street governs itself." But I wasn't done. Not yet. I'd turned down the city's offer to join the temporary oversight committee because I didn't want a seat. I wanted a mirror held up to the mess Wanda had created. And buried deep in the mess was one final thread I hadn't pulled yet. The grant money. The city had frozen the funds after uncovering Wanda's fraudulent application, but a portion just under $12,000 had already been disbursed before the investigation began. That money was gone. Disappeared. And the city wanted it accounted for. I reached out to my contact in the city attorney's office again and asked for access to the forensic audit. What they found raised more than eyebrows. Wanda had funneled the funds into a private account under a shell LLC called Community Care Strategies, which she listed as a neighborhood beautification contractor. But there had been no work, no invoices, no equipment purchases. The only transaction traced to that account was a cashier's check made payable to a man named Curtis Lyle. I'd never heard of him, but the name popped up again in the police reports from the night Jenna spotted the man peering through her window, the same man my camera caught snooping around. He'd used an alias when questioned by police and was let go due to lack of evidence. But now we had a connection. Wanda had paid him. The DA's office amended the charges to include misuse of public funds and conspiracy to commit criminal surveillance. Curtis was picked up 2 days later in a neighboring town driving a rental car full of surveillance equipment, most of it unregistered. He didn't talk much, but he didn't need to. The paper trail spoke volumes. The prosecutor offered me a chance to testify at the trial. Not just about the harassment or the forged documents, but about the pattern, the abuse of power, the community manipulation. I agreed. The courtroom was packed the day I took the stand. Wanda was there, flanked by 2 attorneys and wearing a stiff gray blazer, her hair darker than I remembered. She didn't meet my eyes once. Behind her sat Marla, face blank, eyes focused on the floor like she was trying to disappear into it. I walked the jury through the timeline, how it started with a baseless accusation, escalated to character assassination, and culminated in a fraudulent nonprofit scheme designed to siphon public funds under the guise of neighborhood safety. I showed them the letter Jenna had received, the forged complaint Wanda asked Jordan to sign, and the audio recording where she openly discussed fabricating threats to secure the grant. When I finished, the courtroom was quiet. Not tense, just stunned. The prosecutor leaned in. "Mr. Neely, in your opinion, what was amiss?" Summers' motive. I didn't hesitate. Control. She needed to believe this street belonged to her. When the HOA wasn't enough, she built a false authority. When authority wasn't enough, she tried to rewrite reality. Wanda's attorney objected, but the judge overruled. My testimony stood. The trial lasted 3 more days. Curtis admitted to being hired to gather leverage on me and Jenna. He didn't know the full story, just that Wanda had promised evidence of illegal activity and paid him under the table. He pled out in exchange for a reduced sentence, and his testimony sealed the deal. Wanda was convicted on 4 felony counts: defamation, misuse of public funds, criminal conspiracy, and unlawful surveillance. Marla, who had tried to claim ignorance, was convicted on conspiracy and obstruction. The judge didn't hold back. Wanda received a 5-year sentence with no possibility of parole for the first 2. Marla was sentenced to 18 months and ordered to pay restitution, including the full grant amount. The court also mandated that all properties tied to Wanda's fraudulent nonprofit be liquidated to cover legal costs and damages. One of those properties was her own house. The city seized it, and the proceeds went to a community restoration fund managed by a new, locally elected volunteer board, not a formal HOA, but a group focused on actual needs: repaving sidewalks, installing neighborhood lights, and building a small playground in the vacant lot at the end of the street. I didn't join the board, but I did donate the entirety of my defamation settlement to their startup fund. Not because I didn't want the money, believe me, I earned every penny, but because the community needed to heal, and I wasn't about to cash in on scars. Jenna sent me a photo a few weeks later. She was smiling, standing on the steps of her new home near the coast, holding a set of keys in one hand and a rescue pup leash in the other. She'd named him Radar. No leash violations there. As for me, I finally replaced the old mailbox Wanda once hovered near. The new one's made of weathered steel, bolted to a post I sunk myself. No rust, no wiggle, just solid, quiet permanence. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long over the sidewalk, Jordan walked up with a beer in each hand. We sat on the porch again, just like we had the night before the recall, watching a couple of kids race scooters down the street. "You ever think about running for city council?" he asked, half joking. I laughed. "Only if they let me install security cameras in the voting booths." He grinned, shaking his head. Wanda didn't know who she was messing with. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or spotlights. Sometimes it's a quiet evening, a safe street, and the knowledge that the truth, steady, deliberate, and unshakable, did what it was always meant to do. It stood,